Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is Go Again, a fabulous video cast covering the trading card game Flesh and Blood. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando. The elemental mechanics from Tales of Aria each have their own strengths and weaknesses. However, Ice Control seems best positioned, at least early, to be the most consistent and disruptive of the three elements over the long term. Built around cards and effects that generate Frostbite tokens that mess with an opponent's game plan, Ice Control looks to lock down and trip up the opponent while building for massive attacks or while chipping away slowly but steadily. Currently, two heroes have access to Ice: Oldhim with Ice and Earth for a largely defensive strategy, and Lexi with Ice and Lightning for a more flexible hybrid build that applies pressure on multiple fronts via on-hit effects, forcing tough decisions. Today, we're running down Ice Control in its various forms, and why Ice Control and Frostbite are very likely to be the most game-warping mechanics since the introduction of Arcane damage. Hello Flesh and Blood folks, welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast. I'm Andrew with you here as always, and kicking off kind of a series here talking about Frostbite and kind of or I should say Ice Control, really, led of course by Frostbite tokens, and really, the impact or, the lack of the impact that we've seen so far, and that's kind of a good lead-in as to why I wanted to talk about this. I think if we harken back to spoiler season when Oldhim was spoiled, I think it's fair to say that many of us, certainly myself included, were like, man, Frostbite looks to be very, very, very impactful, and it looks very, very scary. Now, I think it's fair to say that early in Tales of Aria meta, we've seen more people going wide with the Lightning strategy. I think a lot of that is due, quite frankly, just to Lightning Press, being able to have it in your hand to fuse and then come over the top. I think it's largely driven by that, but I think it's also something that we typically see in these type of games in early meta, where aggro rules, right? I mean, it's a little, let's be honest, it's a little easier to just go, right? And hey, I'm not taking shots. I've been playing Lightning too, right? So, typically we see aggro come out, and then the control type decks start to come in later as people really start to figure it out and kind of get the idealness of the decks figured out. Now, that's not to say nobody's out there playing control. We have plenty of people out there playing Oldhim, plenty of people out there playing Ice Lexi, right? There's the continuous debate on, is Lightning Lexi better, is Ice Lexi better? It was last week, Eli did a deck tech for us on his Ice Lexi control, where he was basically just pumping in a couple damage, really forcing those on hit effects, and making life hard for his opponent, and it was very, very successful. And we're going to continue to see decks like that develop over time, right? So let's go in, and I mean, we all know what Frostbite does, right? But it's big. I mean, it's big. Screwing up your opponent's cost curve by 1 is pretty huge, right? And we do want to note, by the way, something that got pointed out, which was kind of funny. I mean, because it is the way it works, right? But even if you tunic, it costs you. Right, so you can't, in that case, like, it would just, I guess it would fee. Well, no, because you have to pay to actually get the 1 off of Tunic, because it is an activated ability. So I think it's just kind of funny, right? But it makes sense. I mean, that's the way it is. So the two heroes we have right now that have Ice Control, have access to Ice, are Lexi and Oldhim. Now, Lexi is. So I'm going to say Lexi's the more straightforward of the two, but that's not entirely true. But what I mean is, it's inherent to her hero ability, right? So for her, all you have to do is have a face-down card in your arsenal, throw it face up, and boom, they get a Frostbite token, right? Really, for the most part, you own your destiny on that, right? You can kind of play a little shorter or a little like long game turn where, you use like a Weave Ice or something in your hand to fuse, and then you hold it and then slap it down in your arsenal in the next turn. Keep doing that, and hopefully you're slowing them down enough that essentially limiting yourself to that one less card turn isn't necessarily as impactful because you're essentially putting the additional pressure on them. And that doesn't mean you're always going to have a 3-card turn. A lot of times you'll be able to go on, off, or whatever, right? But that's largely what you're going to do, is you're going to make decisions to do build-up turns to throw it in your arsenal so that you can disrupt them and hope that your disruption of them is going to get you the value back of going less the turn before. So she's the more straightforward of them. Well, kind of, right? And the reason I say kind of is because if you look at the heroes themselves, Oldhim on his hero ability doesn't really disrupt in the same way, right? He doesn't poop out the Frostbite tokens. He can take the damage. Do note, by the way, that if it has to be Earth for the to do damage, which is quite relevant, right? And I think that's why Oldhim's going to take a little bit more for people to figure out, kind of across the board. But anyway, so you have to have if you do ice for him, then it costs him a card, which is great. So it is inherent disruption, but it's not disruption that pushes really your game forward. I mean, disruption never pushes your game forward. It just kind of stalls so you can push your game forward. I get that. But the reason I say he is and he isn't more straightforward is, like I said, doesn't necessarily have it on his hero ability, but he does have Winter's Wail, right? So for 3, you swing for 4, and if it hits, as long as you pitch an ice that way, you can create a Frostbite token under their control. I mean, that's pretty good, right? So unless they have a defense reaction that's like a 0/4 fate a fate foreseen, sink below, something like that, it's going to cost them cards to avoid taking that in, or equipment. But I mean, you guys know what I mean, right? It's 4 is that magic number, and unless they've got kind of the right stuff and they want to basically put in additional resources, they're going to take it, and then they're going to have to put in additional resources. So, Winter's Wail's, I mean, just swinging your hammer and putting a Frostbite on, that's also straightforward, right? So, I get that. The problem with him in that fashion is that, at a very basic level, you have to hit them 40 times. Right now, yes, you have Terra Sunders and you have Pummels, which I've gone on record. Well, I mean, I don't think anybody's going to question me about talking about Pummel, but you guys know I think Terra Sunder's the best card in the set. So obviously you have other stuff that you can do there, no question about it. And sure, maybe you build up for a couple turns in true Guardian style, build up, and then swing for a bajillion, right? I mean, that's crush them into oblivion. So you have a lot of options there, and sure, there are other cards out there, and we don't need to go through them really, but there are other cards out there that create Frostbite or create discards with more disruption type stuff. But the overall challenge present to in any type of game, but in any type of situation like this is what you are spending to cause them disruption actually costing them something permanent. And that's kind of the interesting thing with Oldhim, right? Is you have to pitch a card to make them put a card on the bottom of their deck. And that's what's in terms of his defense reaction. I mean, right? So sure, you can put a cruddy, you can turn like an amulet, like, the good uses of that would be like an amulet of ice or something that doesn't necessarily defend. You can do that, but remember, it's not defending, right? So all you're really doing is slowing, the advantage to that is slowing down the go-wides. But in a big hit type scenario where you're looking at taking 7 or 8 yourself, something like that, it's not really going to help you, right? Because if you have a handful of ice cards, and they come at you for 8 and they have no cards in their hand, then you don't get anything out of his defense reaction, right? And sure, you can defend with those cards, unless, like I said, they're low defense cards. But that's one of the challenges there, really in front of him. Is it seems like if you go too heavy disruption on Oldhim, it actually hurts him. And the kind of the other problem, at least when I've been trying to theory craft Oldhim, and full disclaimer of he doesn't really appeal to me as a hero. I haven't put a ton of effort out there, but I do want to kind of understand him. And when I go through and I look at the ice cards, there's not a ton of them that seem super good from the blue pitch version, right? I mean, you have some that are really, really good, like Weave Ice and stuff. Those are super good cards. But in terms of some of the like ice-based attacks, they're not super great, because remember, Oldhim's elemental stuff is not ice. So you're relatively limited overall because remember, when you look at, so like Eli's deck tech that he gave us for Lexi, he had, I think, like 15 or so ice cards in his deck, but that's because he was playing red and blue. And Oldhim, remember, if you're trying to use the 3-pitch for Winter's Wail, he doesn't have the red and blue, right? So you can't double dip. You only can use the blue pitch of those. I mean, sure, you could pitch 2 cards to this, I suppose, but like, that's not really what you want to be doing, right? So the limitation currently for Oldhim, barring some supplemental set coming out, which likely will, I mean, basically any ice blue that ever gets printed, he gets better and better, right? As long as those are worthwhile. But yeah, I think that's one. I mean, certainly, I think that's one of the challenges in front of him. So those are really the options in front of us now. Right now, it does seem to me that Ice Lexi seems to be in the better position, and you can kind of go. I mean, that's kind of the great. I think that's why a lot of people are having fun with Lexi right now. Is there's a lot of really different ways you can go. I mean, you can do the Eli strategy like he presented to us was do it with Voltaire. So you try to do a fuse with an on-hit effect and then slide a second arrow in, so they either dump their hand or they basically get forced to dump their hand. Meanwhile, you poop out Frostbite. Or you can just try to go like Shiver and just dominate and get 1 or 2 damage in with an on-hit effect and just kind of slowly chip away. And, I think both are very valid. I think they'll develop over time, of course. And, Lexi's ability to pack Lightning Press is actually not irrelevant, right? It's not irrelevant. Even if you're doing ice strategy, it's still a good card. So that's I think why people are preferring Lexi right now is she just seems to have more options available to her, right? Whereas the Oldhim mix of earth and ice, it's just too slow. I think right now it's too slow and grindy, but people are going to figure that out, I think. So, I mean, because, if you look at him from a defense reaction point of view, you want to try and have an earth to pitch for him, and you want to try and have an ice to pitch for Winter's Wail. I mean, he's really one of the few heroes that it feels wants to be both, right? Whereas with the other heroes, it feels like you kind of, for the most part, want to pick one or the other. Like I said, with Lightning Press for Lexi, maybe with some splash. But Oldhim feels like he wants to do both. And one of the things in all of these type of games, but I think especially so in Fab, is it's kind of the jack of all trades scenario, right? Like, the more you try to do, the less focused you become in what you're trying to do. And stalling, generally stalling doesn't work out for you well. So I think those are the challenges in front of him now. And then, to be honest, if you're playing a crush-focused deck trying to go bigger, I think, at least right now, Bravo just kind of does it better. So I think those are the challenges in front of them both. Now, that is as of right now. I still think Frostbite has potential to be very, very, very scary, right, in the long run. And we'll have to see what cards get produced in the future. I mean, in a supplemental set, every card that comes out that can poop out more Frostbite tokens and push through damage is going to make everything better. So the last and kind of closing, I wanted to really sit down and think about it. How many Frostbite tokens do you need how many Frostbite tokens does your opponent need, really, to effectively slow them down? And the only answer that I've come up there is why I'm doing a second part of this, which is it depends by hero, right? It really does. One Frostbite, in most cases, I think that one Frostbite token is basically as good as 2 Frostbite tokens until you hit probably 3, right? Once you hit the third one, you're basically guaranteeing that they have to have it's a lot easier to make them sack a 1 or a 2. It's a lot easier as a player to have a 1 or, like a red or a yellow than it is to be forced to use one of your blues, because Obviously, it's going to skew people's ratios going forward as ice becomes more and more popular. But at least right now, where my head is at, is that unless people are running all blue, I mean, people, for strategies like even Lexi, she's going to run red. She's going to run mostly reds and blues, right? So if you hit that 3 mark and you require them to pitch a blue, I think that's where you basically start to shut them down. Whereas most of these decks that are running a red-blue mix with the occasional yellow, I think they can take 1. And I think that when they're taking 1, taking 2 is not necessarily in most cases as bad. But once you hit 3 and it requires a different card, it requires an entire card to that, I think that's kind of the tipping point. That said, in most cases, pooping, creating a turn that makes them have that many Frostbite tokens, in many cases costs you your turn. So unless those are non-permanent cards, that's the problem, right? And that's why Winter's Wail is so good. Like, I really like Winter's. Once we get more blue pitches to feed it, Winter's Wail is incredible, right? Because it's a non-consumable card that makes them consume cards either way, right? And they're gonna have to, if they defend, it's permanent consumption. If they're taking the 1 in Frostbite, it's non-permanent consumption, but it's still resources they have to put in it. So, as Winter's Wail gets more blue pitch ices, I think the favor may swing to Oldhim. But still, he's, shy of the Pummels and the Terra Sunders. He's still got to hit a lot of times at not very many damages per time. But, it doesn't take too many Pummel turns to ruin somebody's day. So anyway, that's it for part 1. Like I said, I'm going to be coming back in the next episode, and I want to talk, I kind of have a table, and I want to talk about what I see as the impact to each one of the various heroes in Classic Constructed. And then when I was putting that together, I was like, oh, hell, let's just go ahead and do one for Blitz. So that'll be the next one. We'll be looking at the heroes and how they might have to change their strategies in Classic Constructed. And then in the third one, we'll come back and talk about how they need to change for Blitz. So anyway, that's it for today. For those of you, I know that there are a lot of you guys out there working on your ice decks. And let us know how, do you agree with what I'm saying? Is that, do you agree, I think, with my fundamental thing that as of right now, in a lot of these cases, I think that Oldhim has to put in resources in order to make you, I think in many of these cases, Oldhim has to spend resources to make you kind of just have a longer turn, which doesn't always cost you. Because remember, when they're pitching to Frostbite, it's, yes, a card from their hand, but it's not necessarily a permanent card. And in the case where Oldhim needs to move faster, because he does, let's be honest, a lot of times I think that's what's limiting him right now. And I think eventually people are going to figure it out. So that's what I want to know from you is, have you figured it out, or maybe you haven't figured it out yet because you're not, winning everything, but maybe you're on track and you think you have a good strategy. I would love to hear from you. I'm actually inviting people to, give us some stuff, throw us some lists, and if you've got a good strategy, let's get you on here and let's share your thoughts with everybody if you want to do it. So that's going to be it for me today. I want to thank everybody very much for tuning in and putting up with the funny snow stuff. I'm not stopping. We're doing it for the next 2. I made the overlay. We're going to use it, baby. So anyway, folks, thanks very much. Keep enjoying Flesh and Blood, and go Commando.